Week 12 doesn't close with resolution. It closes with placement. And that distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Resolution suggests an ending, a tying together, a sense that something has been solved and put away. But nothing here was meant to be solved. The work you've done across this sequence was not designed to deliver answers or produce a finished version of you. It was designed to restore internal orientation so that choice could return to the correct place. That restoration has already happened. What matters now is not what you understand, not what you can articulate, and not even what you can explain about yourself. What matters is where directions are being made from. That's the only metric that holds at this stage. Everything else is secondary. If you look back over this week, you may struggle to point to a defining insight. There may not have been a moment that felt like a breakthrough or a realization that you could name cleanly. Instead, the most meaningful shifts likely showed up as absences. Less internal debate, less urgency to justify yourself, less pressure to reach some imagined point of arrival. These absences aren't signs that the work has faded or lost intensity. They're signs that the system has become coherent. When internal functions are no longer competing, effort drops away. When effort drops away, experience feels quieter. Not emptier, quieter. This is often misread. Many people assume that growth should feel like expansion, intensity, or momentum. But expansion is loud only when something is pushing against resistance. Once resistance dissolves, movement becomes smooth. Smooth movement doesn't announce itself. You may notice that clarity now feels different than it did earlier in the process. It no longer demands attention. It doesn't arrive with emotional charge or mental commentary. It simply stays available. This is the difference between seeking direction and standing inside of it. When you're seeking, clarity has to compete with doubt, fear, and anticipation. When you're standing inside it, clarity doesn't need to compete at all. It just is. At this stage, life no longer needs to be interpreted constantly. You're no longer asking what every experience means or how it fits into a larger narrative. Experience becomes something you meet rather than something that you manage. It doesn't mean you stop reflecting or thinking. It means reflection no longer functions as control. That shift is subtle but profound. Earlier in the work, interpretation served an important purpose. It helped you make sense of fragmentation. It helped you identify patterns. It helped you recover parts of yourself that had been operating independently. But interpretation was always a temporary scaffold. Once orientation is restored, the scaffold can come down. Leaving it in place would only block movement. This is why week 12 doesn't ask you to hold anything tightly. Authorship is not maintained through vigilance. It's maintained through recognition. You don't need to police your thoughts or monitor your reactions. When you notice yourself stepping back into urgency, explanation, or reaction, the work isn't to correct or analyze it. It's simply to return to where choice originates. That return doesn't require effort. The system knows the way now. You may notice that when you return to that place, there's no dramatic internal shift. No internal applause, no sense of accomplishment. There's simply steadiness, a sense of being seated correctly. That steadiness is the clearest signal that authorship is active. This is also where many people feel disoriented, even briefly. Without the constant activity of self-analysis, there can be a sense of emptiness at first. Not because something is missing, but because something that used to fill space is no longer needed. That space isn't a void, it's capacity. Capacity to respond rather than react. Capacity to speak without rehearsing. Capacity to decide without reopening the question internally. These capacities don't feel dramatic, they feel ordinary. But ordinary at this level is powerful. Week 12 isn't an ending, and it's not a beginning. It's a handoff. From instruction to practice. From observation to participation. From understanding to responsibility. The blueprint no longer needs to be consulted as a map. It becomes the stance from which you move. This is important to name clearly. If you continue to treat the blueprint as something you reference, you keep yourself in a learner's position. Learning has served its purpose. From here on, the blueprint lives through behavior, not through contemplation. It shows up in how you speak when clarity is present, in how you pause when urgency tries to lead, in how you remain present with consequence rather than anticipating or avoiding it. This is where integration lives. Integration doesn't happen in moments of insight. It happens in moments of follow-through. In moments where you don't soften a boundary. Where you don't over-explain a decision. Where you don't collapse into justification when silence would suffice. These moments teach the system that authorship is not theoretical. It's lived. There's nothing you need to prove as this week closes. Nothing that you need to complete. No internal checklist to satisfy. Completion is not the signal here, placement is. And placement reveals itself through ease, not effort. You may find that you're less interested in defending yourself going forward. Less interested in narrating your growth. Less interested in tracking progress. This isn't disengagement, it's maturity. Identity becomes less important when orientation is stable. You may also find that challenges will still arise. Emotions still move. Old patterns still appear from time to time. None of this indicates regression. It indicates life. The difference now is that these experiences no longer displace you from the author's seat. They pass through without taking control. That's the measure of this work. If you find yourself searching for a feeling that tells you the work is complete, you'll likely miss what's actually happening. Completion is a mental construct. Integration is behavioral. It reveals itself in what no longer requires effort. Notice what you're no longer doing. Notice what no longer feels necessary. Notice how often you already know what to do before the question fully forms. These are signs that orientation has returned. This isn't a finish line. Finish lines belong to tasks. This is a change in how you walk. You stop circling. You stop orbiting insight. You stop hovering at the edge of decision. You begin walking from where you already stand. And that changes everything quietly. From here forward, there will be moments when you forget this position. That's not failure. It's habit. When you remember, you return. No correction, no analysis, no self-judgment. Just return. Return to where choice originates. Return to the steadiness beneath urgency. Return to the quiet clarity that doesn't need to speak loudly to be real. This is the work now, not becoming someone else, not achieving a higher state, not resolving your life into something tidy, simply remaining where responsibility belongs. And moving from there, that's the close of this week. Not with an ending, but with a stance. and with the trust that you already know how to take the next step. Not because of what you've been told it is, but because you're finally standing where direction lives.